Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the Underground. As is tradition at this point, it has been a very full week, has it not? Lots of stuff to cover, so let's go ahead and jump right to it. We'll start off with probably the more unfortunate information first, and that is congressional actions this week. So this week saw quite a few bills being introduced, but one that kind of caught my eye earlier in the week was House Resolution 8445. Again, you can research this on your own. The full official text has not been provided to the official congressional website, but you can go to the bill's sponsor. His website has the actual proposed text of the bill. Bottom line for this one is that this would amend Title 38 and the Service Member Civil Relief Act in order to grant veterans benefits, education, healthcare, stuff like that, to American citizens who are enlisted or commissioned in the Israeli Defense Forces. So again, on Memorial Day weekend, this sort of thing being introduced is kind of, very, very contentious, I guess. But I think that reading the bill is definitely worth checking out, because I think this is probably just stepping back for a moment and looking more empirically. I think this is probably the first time where a nation is looking at potentially granting veterans benefits to the military of another nation. So yeah, it's a pretty contentious topic, so I'll just kind of leave it for there and kind of point out that this was introduced this week. So moving on down to a more suspicious incident, there was a suspicious shooting that this event actually happened in Moore County, North Carolina, down there in Carthage. And it occurred back on May 3rd, but we're just learning about it now because the local sheriff's department just released details of the shooting. Again, that occurred back on May 3rd. They just released that information a couple of days ago. So the general gist of the story, again, details are really hard to come by, but really the story is one of trespassing turned shooting. So in a very heavily populated special operations community down in Moore County. Again, this is where a lot of special forces guys live and where their families are located. 911 call reports a trespasser several hundred feet off the road into their property, some guy taking pictures of their house, stuff like that. As the 911 call is going on, this trespassing incident becomes a shooting after the homeowner confronts the trespasser and some kind of altercation occurred. Trespasser gets shot 4 times. There's kind of the general gist of the story. However, of course, due to just looking at where this event took place, there's more to the story than meets the eye. Now, I'm going by the details that were provided by the Moore County Sheriff's Office. On social media right now, just so that everyone's aware, I'm reminded of a quote or a generalized phrase. It's been said by many people over the years, but I think, I don't know, probably Don Shipley made it popular, but the phrase goes something to the effect of, during the Vietnam War, there were 450 Navy SEALs that saw service in Southeast Asia, and I've met all 20,000 of them. So the same thing kind of applies when you're talking about very heavily special forces communities, such as down in North Carolina. Lot of special forces groups down there. I'll just kind of leave it at that. But there's a lot of people that know a guy or have a guy in the know that can give them the full story, but they can't say what really happened. So you see how this kind of thing gets sort of spun up. So you've got a lot of people on social media claiming that they have some sort of insider knowledge, but they can't say because they're too cool for school. So again, somebody like me, I'm just a taxpayer, I just read what the sheriff's department says and kind of draw my own conclusions from that. I don't need to know really, super secret squirrel details. However, the kind of I mentioned that in the good fellowship of revealing what the sheriff's department's already kind of revealed, which is that this is probably not just a case of trespassing. This is probably foreign intelligence collection. So the official story, or rather the initial story, was that the guy who was shot wasn't really a trespasser. He was a subcontractor for Utilities One, an electrical subcontractor. So that's kind of spun out of control. However, the sheriff's department, in their own, again, press briefings, have indicated that The guy was not wearing a uniform. He was not in an official vehicle, as far as I can tell. He had no identification on him whatsoever that pointed that he was working for the subcontractor or still working for the subcontractor. He had no equipment, and he was taking pictures of this guy's house several hundred feet off the road. His body was located along a power line. However, when the shooting occurred, again, reports are very sketchy, but some local media is saying that another individual was with this guy and he fled in a rental car, not like a utility vehicle. So, again, just sketchy beyond sketch, right? This whole story. And it gets worse. Apparently, the individual was Chechen. So foreign identity documents were found on this guy and his vehicle at the scene. Do you see where we're going with this? So it's not that strong of a leap to make the assessment, again, purely an assessment, that this guy was probably Russian SVR or Russia's Foreign Intelligence Services. And to me, this is my own assessment, this stuff is very, very common. You get a foreign national working for not a prime contractor, but a subcontractor who usually has looser hiring practices, right? They use things like electrical utilities, salesman jobs, all kinds of things like that to get access to something so that he can claim that, I was just working on the power line. Well, you weren't really. You were trying to get intelligence on a high-ranking special operations commander. So, pretty sketchy all around. Again, not very many details are coming out about this. Very little is confirmed. However, the FBI is now investigating, and DHS is investigating. And the reasons for their investigation are, well, I think fairly obvious, but I also thought, this is pretty interesting. They said, one report, I don't know how true it is, but one media source claimed that the FBI is investigating to provide translation services, because apparently a lot of the dudes working for this electrical subcontractor are Chechens. So, does that not sound quite sketchy right to start with? You've got a lot of, foreign nationals from Chechnya who are working in an electrical subcontractor company which services the private residences of some very high-ranking special operations community members, right? It sounds pretty sketchy. So that, my assessment is that this was probably a foreign intelligence collection operation that went sour. Again, this kind of poor tradecraft is, become kind of par for the course with regards to that. Like I mentioned in some of the wire reports, I've been looking for a chance to kind of mention these things more often, but it's really hard to say what stories kind of matter. But I did mention in the wire reports this week a lot of gate crashes at military bases. Again, very few details, but you can definitely see that there have been a lot of suspicious incidents occur. The Quantico incident, there a couple of weeks ago, actually on the same exact day as this shooting, on May 3rd, two Jordanian nationals tried to crash the gate at Quantico in a box truck, a rental box truck. So, again, pretty suspicious. It can't be confirmed, but allegedly one of those guys was on a terror watch list, and he had recently just come across the border, the southern U.S. border. So, again, very few details. There's probably going to be corrections made to this story as time goes on, so please just take everything with a grain of salt as usual. However, these sorts of things, the gate crashes, these suspicious incidents involving the personal lives of, very, secret and, clandestine kind of military things, this is all just kind of a very big, alarm bell to kind of say, look, pay attention. Situational awareness is definitely something that is in short supply these days, but there are a lot of shadow war kind of things going on American soil that you just can't point to and say this was without question a foreign intelligence action. But there are a lot of indicators, and certainly enough to increase one's own situational awareness. So again, things like this are probably going to keep happening more often, especially this election season, as things start heating up on that front. But I did want to mention it. I know, kind of a long-winded way of explaining this story, but it's very complicated. There's not a whole lot of details public, and what little details are public, very, very, very contentious. So, Let's go ahead and move on out west, and where I wanted to mention this basically just as a way of like not forgetting this occurred. A judge dismissed the convictions of 5 U.S. Navy officers in relation to the Fat Leonard scandal from a few years ago. Again, for those of you who probably weren't aware of the Fat Leonard scandal at the time, or they haven't really known what that is, basically this guy named Fat Leonard, a Malaysian businessman who was quite a portly fellow, had cooked up a scheme to overcharge the U.S. Navy for services rendered when port calls were made. So basically, he was giving kickbacks to, I don't know if any ship command, I think there were quite a few ship captains implicated, but also logistics personnel and admirals and such. It was a whole big scandal in the Navy a few years ago, where these guys were getting kickbacks and, you know, being paid in luxury goods and all kinds of things like that, while this guy was overcharging the U.S. government for the services provided for U.S. Navy ships. So again, get the carrier to park in the most expensive expensive berth in the port, and you know he gets a kickback from that, and everybody just basically grifts the United States government. Again, this kind of blew up in 2013, but a couple of days ago, a California judge didn't overturn. There was no appeal met. The judge just threw out the case, threw out the convictions. So these guys had confessed to receiving bribes. They were convicted of receiving bribes, and the judge, just a few years later, kind of did away with their whole cases. So again, there are unconfirmed reports that the U.S. government, the prosecution, was actually the one who asked the judge to do that, but I don't know if that's true or not. I can say that if it is true, the U.S. government asking a judge to overthrow a conviction is, you know, that's a pretty bad precedent. But again, I think that probably happens quite a lot. But again, just wanted to remind everyone that, you know, corruption scandals definitely are still occurring. Moving over to Europe, in the Netherlands, in The Hague, I did want to mention it this week that the International Criminal Court is looking at potentially issuing arrest warrants for both the Israeli leadership and the Hamas leadership. It's important to remember the lead prosecutor for the ICC has submitted paperwork to arrest them both. Okay, so it's not just one side or the other. I know this is a very hot button topic, so I won't talk about it too much, but I did want to make sure that everyone's aware that that did happen. This is separate from the ICJ, the International Court of Justice down in South Africa. This is the International Criminal Court, the ICC, collectively what we know as The Hague, right? When we're referring to this. This can apply to a few different institutions, but this is the ICC, in my opinion, and internationally, due to the number of people that recognize it, the ICC is a lot more of a legitimate, like, international law, like, body, I guess, than the ICJ. However, we're still dealing with international law here, which doesn't mean, you know, a hill of beans in some countries. The United States doesn't recognize the ICC. Israel doesn't. Neither does Russia, because the ICC issued arrest warrants for Vladimir Putin a few months ago, or last year, I think. So, you know, there's nothing really to be had here. The reason that I wanted to mention this is because this has kind of sparked several other nations throughout Europe to kind of start talking about the Gaza situation more in terms of the international norms and targeting procedures that Israel is kind of going with. So again, I will let the heads of state of various European nations speak for themselves with regards to that. However, you know, it's a very contentious topic, right? So there is no win to be had by any side here with regards to the conflict itself, but also discussing it, right? So you know, I'll just kind of leave it at that, and just kind of mention that I don't think the tide is turning with regards to international sentiment, with regards to this or this conflict or whatever, but it is becoming harder and harder to ignore, and it is becoming harder and harder to discuss. So, again, very challenging times, very challenging times. So, I'll move on to kind of the story of the week, I guess. There have been several stories of the week, but the one that kind of brought a lot of news forth is the Iranian helicopter crash, which killed Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi. along with his defense minister, or no, excuse me, foreign minister, the governor of the province they were in, and I think the Ayatollah's representative. So basically a helicopter full of VIPs crashed in a valley in northern Iran. Again, details have been very, very hard to kind of nail down because, well, the nature of Iranian media is, first of all, the media in Iran is basically state-controlled. So it's really hard to get, like, the honest truth out of media. You know, you can say that about all media, I guess, but when it comes to like developing stories and incidents in Iran, you have one media station saying one thing and another media station saying the exact opposite. So unlike in most Western media, you have like minor changes in like the story. In Iranian media, you've got very big changes in the story. So one of the whole like big things as to whether or not something nefarious may have been going on is there are a few kind of indicators that I outlined in the previous wire. Like one, they originally said they were in one helicopter. That is suspicious, which is why I wrote a lot of text about it. Then the next day they said in an Al Jazeera interview, no, there were 3 helicopters and the other 2 helicopters made it back just fine. Is that true? I don't know. The Iranian media from the very get-go, even before the helicopter crash site was located, they said it was weather. So this is very strange for Iran, who tends to blame the West or blame anyone when anything sort of nefarious happens in their country. But they went with weather. Like, totally innocent, no one whatsoever. Whereas, basically, the entire planet is saying, well, this was Israel or the United States or somebody who assassinated the Iranian president. Is there any evidence to support that? No, it's just instinct. Like, look at what's going on in the world, But Iran just says, no, it wasn't that. It was all just a pure accident. So, sketch beyond sketch. So, I'll just kind of let the internet theories just kind of spin up a little while on that. But as far as, like, the actual details of the story, there's really very little to go on. I will say, though, that there is a general sentiment that Iran really does not need this right now. They really do not need this kind of internal struggle. Now, again, it's not like the Ayatollah was killed, right? It's the president of Iran, which it has kind of ebbed and flowed over the years. Back a few years ago when Ahmadinejad was the guy in charge of the presidency, at least, it seemed like it had more power because Ayatollah kind of had stepped back a little ways and given him a little bit more like leeway to make foreign policy decisions. But this last guy, Raisi, he basically was just a mouthpiece for the Ayatollah, which is how their electoral or their like political system is set up. The presidency doesn't really have any power in Iran, like compared to the Ayatollah, who's like the supreme leader, But it's hard to say, was this an assassination or was this just a pure accident? There's evidence either way, There's evidence, there's a whole wealth of evidence to suggest that this was just a horrific accident. But just the international circumstances, considering all factors, all sources, right? It just doesn't make any sense for an accident to occur. Either way, like I mentioned, it's probably not likely to change policy too much. Iran is going to have elections. We'll see who comes into the office. If it's somebody who's more along the lines of the Ayatollah's line of thinking, that may be a clue. However, I wasn't really aware of any like problems that Raisi had with Ayatollah or anything. So I don't know if that, smoking gun of there being like problems with the Iranian system, I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but definitely Iran is going to be going through some, probably domestic strife that they didn't want or need right now. So again, something to keep in mind, something to keep on the, kind of look out for is what's going on there, especially considering the context of other European heads of state suddenly having accidents, or getting shot or something like that. So again, very, very troubling times when it comes to heads of state throughout Europe. But moving to the Far East, trouble is definitely brewing in the South China Sea. Currently, there is a massive, massive Chinese naval and Air Force exercise called Joint Sword 2024A. Really, when it comes to assessing the size of this drill, we don't really know just yet because A couple of days ago when they first started, there were 40-something airplanes. Now they're up to 60. Tomorrow, maybe more. A few dozen ships here and there. The general theory, just cutting right to the question that everyone's going to ask is this a precursor for an invasion of Taiwan? Bottom line, I don't know. However, there are some other factors to consider. Over the past 24 hours, you can see kind of the chart, the map that the ROC Defense Forces, the Republic of China, Taiwan, Taiwanese Defense Forces. I personally try to call them Taiwanese Defense Forces rather than the ROC, because it's really kind of confusing to people who don't understand that Taiwan calls itself the Republic of China. So that's how this sort of works. But anyway, the ROC Defense Forces, Taiwanese Defense Forces, put out these charts showing like the airspace incursions, and right now there is essentially a large naval blockade around Taiwan in the form of an exercise. Now, is this a true exercise, or is this a military blockade or a precursor to a blockade? We don't know yet, and it's very unlikely for us to know until the moment comes. However, like I mentioned previously, we can rely on things like these stoplight charts that I've kind of made for myself to help me really kind of organize my thoughts with regards to the indicators and warnings of how an invasion might occur. Now, again, these are not all the indications and warnings, but these are some like really just a list of go, no-go criteria that I can monitor myself and that I can kind of keep an eye out with regards to is China going to invade Taiwan? Generally speaking, I don't know where the theory started, but there have been a few people that seem to suggest that Taiwan will be invaded by June of this year or sometime this summer. I can't confirm that. I am not really seeing that. I think that if we're going to be seeing something that soon, we would be going by this chart here, the emergency indicators that I've got. And we are meeting a few of those criteria, so I'll just mention rapid deployment of naval assets. Yeah, this drill is definitely an indicator of an invasion. If you've got ships surrounding Taiwan, that's a pretty good indicator. Another good indicator is weather. The typhoon season is usually, well, the more severe one is August-September time frame. So if they're going to do it, it's going to be like sometime soon. Also, I think personally, just strategically, if China's going to go for Taiwan, it's probably going to be before the American election this year, because after the election, you're going to have, no matter who wins, you're going to have a president on their second term. And they're probably going to be able to have a little bit more leeway to push back against China a little bit. Not that I'm saying that either candidate would. I'm just saying that China probably doesn't want that uncertainty. So now's the time, right? Now's the time. If China wants to do it, now's the time. But with regards to other indicators, submarine cables being cut, that's going to be the next step. So if you start seeing reports of that, you're probably going to see a priority, or hopefully not, but maybe an immediate report, wire report from me that if submarine cables have been cut near Taiwan. Now, there were a few cables cut a few months ago, communications cables. They were cut, I think, by fishing vessels, right, who seem to really enjoy driving their ships as fast as possible and dropping an anchor right over top of a cable. We've seen that happen quite a few times, haven't we? But anyway, that hasn't happened quite yet. Something else to be on the lookout for, spy balloons. If you're an American taxpayer and China decides to attack Taiwan, you're going to see attacks here on the homeland of America as well. Maybe not direct attacks, but you're going to see airspace incursions, you're going to see spy balloons, you're going to see all this bad stuff all over again. So if you're, sitting in Montana and you don't give one hoot about Taiwan, you may look up and see a spy balloon one day and suddenly realize that you kind of care a little bit about what's going on in Taiwan. But yeah, so not seeing that just yet. However, I have it here highlighted in yellow, the airspace incursions, because, well, just to be perfectly honest, NORAD and the Department of Defense has lied to the American public regarding every single airspace incursion. They've withheld details. They have tried to hide and conceal Chinese military assets over American soil. And the only reason they went public with it is because the American people found out about it. And they were spying on the American people so that when Americans started talking about it on Twitter, then they went public with it. So, again, going back to the whole Chinese spy incidents from a while back, same thing's going to happen again. And we may not know that there was a Chinese spy balloon over American soil because they've gotten a little bit better at hiding it. But Anyway, you can definitely say, as much as I hate to say it, and I know it makes me sound just, biased as all get out, but look, man, it sure seems to me like NORAD is covering for China because they're covering for China, at least with regards to spy balloons. Now, aircraft's a whole other story, but, anyway, this is something to definitely be on the lookout for. When it comes to foreign powers emergency indicators, basically things that you can look around the world and see are the Americans using their strategic radio stuff? Is the Russian Baronet up and going? Are other nations deploying submarines in kind of like great numbers? So far, not really seeing that so much. There have been a few STRATCOM exercises that were declared by the U.S. government, so the HFGCS has been pretty active lately, to be honest. That's the American Air Force strategic radio system to communicate with submarines and aircraft and all kinds of stuff. Russia's Baronet has been kind of quiet lately. It hasn't been completely turned off, but it just hasn't been. There haven't been any wartime indicators. Let me just say that there haven't been any wartime indicators, at least with this kind of thing. However, one thing that I did want to mention. I don't fully understand it. I'm not a financial expert whatsoever, but this block right here, Financial Elites Jumping Ship. A few days ago, NVIDIA, the GPU manufacturer that everyone kind of knows about, they announced their quarterly earnings report, and there's been some speculation or kind of like talk about how great NVIDIA is doing. And there have been a lot of reports talking about how, NVIDIA stock is going to the moon or something like that. Maybe not to the moon, but it's doing really well, right? There's a lot, so you can go into like the Financial Times, news articles and start reading about NVIDIA and how great they're doing. Their stock's climbing pretty good. Here's the thing though. 2 days ago, TSMC, which is one of the largest manufacturers of semiconductor chips in the world, did an interview with Taiwanese media in which they stated that when these exercises with China started, they stated that they're prepared to hit the kill switch on their factories and basically nuke their own factories just in case China wants to invade Taiwan. So they did this interview as a way of saying, look, we're prepared. And it makes sense. I'm not saying this is a startling revelation. I think they've said the same before, and it makes sense. Like, they have kill switches to basically shut down all their machinery so that Chinese authorities can't use it or China can't use it at all. I would be willing to bet there's probably a little bit more kinetic preparations with their factories, if you know what I mean. So they can hit a button and make that factory one gigantic crater. But here's the deal. So the reason that I'm talking about this is that I don't know if the statistics are still the same, but generally speaking, the rule of thumb is that roughly 80% of the world's high-grade semiconductor chips, if you've got a phone or something and it's got a chip in it that's like a high-grade, semiconductor computer chip, it was made in Taiwan, probably at this exact factory. So most of the whole planet's semiconductor industry is in Taiwan at this series of factories, right? So you've got, TSMC, the manufacturer of the planet's electronics, saying we're going to nuke our factory or, disable it in some way. We're basically going to take our entire operation offline at the flick of a switch or push of a button. And NVIDIA stock is doing well. TSMC makes 100% of NVIDIA's products as far as I'm aware. So what's going on here? Like, is the financial sector that far removed from reality? I'm just thinking, just me, not an economist by any means. I'm thinking in terms of if I made ball bearings, if I was a ball bearing factory owner, and I sold these ball bearings to the Acme Ball Bearing Company, okay? So if I'm sitting here in the ball bearing factory and I'm doing an interview with a journalist, right? And I say, hey, when those enemy troops over there, when they invade my factory, when they come through that door, I'm going to hit this button here and this factory is not going to exist anymore. I would imagine from the Acme Ball Bearing Company that I'm selling these ball bearings to, I would imagine that their stock might take a little bit of a hit. If I'm openly talking about destroying 100% of my ball bearing production capacity, but that's not what's happening. So maybe I'm missing something. I don't know. Maybe I'm just stupid. I don't know. But it sure seems to me like it's very suspicious that the technology sector is growing. We've got all kinds of things going on around the world. We've got conflict kicking off in Africa, in nations that produce the raw minerals and materials to make lithium batteries. Yet lithium battery companies, or companies that are built around the production of lithium batteries, they're doing great. You've got Taiwan preparing for literally a military invasion, and you've got the CEO of a company saying we're gonna level our own factory, either with software or with something else. And the companies that are using those computer chips are doing great. So I don't know what's going on. We're just kind of make-believe land. I mean, maybe I'm missing something, but it seems to me like the world markets, either the financial sector or the tech sector or whatever, they're just not really catching up to reality. Maybe, I don't know. But I thought it was interesting, so I'll mention it. The world panicked a couple of years. Was it last year or 2 years ago when Nancy Pelosi dumped all of her Nvidia stock, or dumped most of it? That makes a lot of sense, to be honest. That a politician that has insider trading knowledge, that get classified reports on Chinese activities with regards to Taiwan, and it makes sense for them to dump cut their losses before the invasion occurs and Taiwan becomes Iwo Jima. But it doesn't seem like that's happening this time. Maybe it may happen in a few days, but it sure seems like there's some other stuff at play here that maybe I'm just not privy to. But when it comes to the soft criteria for Taiwan being invaded by China, we are green on pretty much everything. Foreign oil exports, that's kind of slowed down. This is actually kind of an old slide, but it's still accurate. China has done that. They've been building an awful lot of stuff. They just commissioned a new carrier. They've done sea trials. They're getting ready. I should note, though, that among the Western and exceptionally well-funded military think tank groups, which haven't really been super great lately, there's still the lingering sentiment that maybe China doesn't have enough boats yet. They've got ships, but not boats. There's a difference. Maybe they don't have enough landing craft, small boats to make an invasion actually happen. I don't know about this. I'm not a China analyst, but they definitely seem like, they might be wanting to give it a try this year. I don't know. Definitely, China has seen a lot of financial maneuvering. There have been a lot of consolidation of power within the Chinese defense industry. And they've increasingly been getting the green light from the United States. So I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if these latest series of exercises are kind of like the last exercise before they give it their all and actually go for Taiwan this time. I don't know. I can tell you they're going to need a whole lot more than 60 airplanes, though. They're going to need a few thousand. And when we start seeing that, the Chinese trend, I should say, over the past few years is for every single exercise China does to be a world record exercise. So you'll see people like me basically sound like a broken record, like China has never had an exercise this large before. Well, that's because every exercise they have, they're topping the numbers of the previous exercises so that one day it won't be an exercise, right? This is China's doctrine, going back thousands of years, deception-wise. It makes a lot of sense. The United States would probably do the same thing too in a similar situation, but that's why you're going to see a lot of headlines. Never before unprecedented Chinese military exercise, largest in China's history. Well, yeah, it's because every exercise they do is the largest in China's history. That's their goal, right? To make it seem like the invasion is going to happen for real this time. So, is this latest exercise a precursor to an invasion? I don't know, but China's definitely said so. That's kind of, at least it's refreshing to see the honesty. Chinese officials, including the Chinese military director for their eastern provinces, came out and said, yeah, this is practice for an invasion of Taiwan. We're practicing lining up our landing craft and just China's pretty bold on rhetoric most of the time, but man, I thought, hey, that's pretty bold. You're literally confessing that you're planning, an invasion of Taiwan. So anyway, I guess we'll have to wait and see how that works out. But shifting gears and kind of wrapping things up today with the intercepted GhostNet reports. Quite a lot of random events this week, so I'll go ahead and kind of summarize what I detected. I pulled a little sneaky this week, and I chose a different web SDR. So the web SDR that I received these reports from, I think I used a Utah one, so I got a lot of West Coast kind of reports. And there were three major themes that I got. I, of course, received a lot of people who retransmitted or reformatted the wire reports I do. I try to make the wire reports kind of condensed on Thursdays so that people can more easily copy and paste them. However, this week it wasn't the case. It's been a really thick week for wire reports. But anyway, I got three other kind of news stories that happened. The first of which was the ARRL Hamvention cyber event sort of thing. Basically, there was possibly a hack or a cyber attack or something on the ARRL logbook of the world. So Hamvention occurred, was it last week or this week? I don't really remember. And their logbook of the world was down for a while, and ARRL hasn't really been helpful with kind of showing what went on. So somebody kind of highlighted that. Something else somebody reported, and I don't know where I got this report from. I was really hoping to catch a call sign so I could figure out where this was from, but I didn't. I couldn't see. I just caught a piece of it, which was the report that the UK, on the same day that Rishi Sunak announced the election season, the UK put forth a plan or a reminder for the British people to get ready and prepare. You need to have 3 days of food and water on hand, kind of thing. I don't know if that's really a precursor for much. In 2024, when a government agency or a government in general says be prepared and start stocking up food, that is generally good advice, but I think they're issuing that advice just to stoke fear. So, that's just my own 2 cents on that. But again, interesting report this week. And finally was the Bing API outage. Bing went down and brought down a few other platforms with it. I think DuckDuckGo, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, and ChatGPT. So, yeah, so just an interesting little cyber event. Don't know if it was a cyber attack or whatever, but definitely something quite interesting. So that's pretty much all I have for this week. Again, here are the sources for this week. So, really random things, but yeah, I guess we'll pick things up Monday morning, and we will be back at it with some more wire reports and see if we can muddle through another week of very strange and kinetic news reports going on around the world. So thank you all for watching, and we will see you next time. And as always, fight in the shade.